What's up, guys? Welcome back to another book review. Today, I am taking on Nicholas Sparks' The Return. I, in my last two Nicholas Sparks videos, have said that I am the #1 Nicholas Sparks fan. I am recanting myself of that title because of this book. Let's just dive right into it. If you guys don't know, if you haven't watched any of my reviews before, I do spoil the plots. I tell you everything. So if you have not read it or you plan to read it and you don't want to know everything, watch this video after you've read it. Alright, so let's get into it. The main character is Trevor. He is opening the book, coming back to his deceased grandfather's house that he visited as a child. He's a war veteran, suffers from PTSD. He is an amputee. He's lost some fingers and he lost his ear in war in Afghanistan. Coming home, he's talking to a therapist. Nicholas Sparks is good about pointing out mental health. In each of his stories, somehow he mentions it. So there's that. While being there, there's a casual run-in with a young girl named Callie. She's kind of off-putting. She'll come in later. The main connection he meets with is a deputy, a sheriff's deputy named Natalie, a female. So we can pretty much, from Nicholas Sparks' past, assume what's the framework of this. They are in a city of New Bern, North Carolina. They are spending some time around each other because I don't even really remember what brought Natalie to Trevor's house originally to make her like wander around. I think she said she had previously kept an eye on the property and was making sure no one else had broken in because she had believed someone had broken in. And while that was the part that brought them together, that makes sense why I didn't remember it. Nicholas Sparks did not do a good job setting this book at all. At all. And I'm getting very tired of Nicholas Sparks reusing similar plots. He's using the same plot, essentially, from The Best of Me, where there is an older gentleman who has a house somewhere in North Carolina. There is a person in need who ends up sleeping in the barn of that house. Old man takes said person in, and around that old man, two people are brought together. That's essentially what he did here. Now, he did it in a roundabout way. So, at first, Natalie is into Trevor. Trevor is very into Natalie. Trevor is a doctor. He's planning on taking a residency in Boston. And they're developing this relationship. But she is always kind of one step out the door when it comes to her and Trevor. Natalie is. He's trying to figure out what happened to his grandfather. The last words that his grandfather said to him were kind of confusing. It was like an arraignment of random seeming words where it was like, take care, go to hell, family, find family, you came, now go, please, I love you. And those were like the last words that his grandfather said to him when he was in the hospital. He had like a stroke or a heart attack while he was traveling, and that was kind of the mystery surrounding the book, which was another irritation. I don't come to Nicholas Sparks for mystery and thriller and suspense. I felt like he was trying to do that with this, and I just didn't like it. I didn't like the investigation. There was no reason that we cared about, like, why was his grandfather going here? Again, it was a situation where you were dropped into a scene. These relationships were haphazardly put together based on the plot of another book or story that Nicholas Sparks has. And I don't think that that's cute anymore. Because to me, the writing in this felt lazy. It felt like because there was no story, it somehow turned into a suspense and thriller novel. So we go through. Natalie's very standoffish. We find out why. Trevor has an assumption the whole time that she's seeing someone else when he's right. She's married and her husband is a vegetable. So I did just read Verity. I found a lot of similarities between this book and Verity as well. With there being the character who's a vegetative state You have a romance kind of building around that when it shouldn't be. But there's also some washy factors. Like they pretty much know that Natalie's husband is not going to wake up. They talk very little, but they do discuss how it's her husband Mark's parents that are essentially keeping him alive. They believe taking him off the feeding tube would be murder, essentially. And Natalie is explaining all this to Trevor in a night when they're essentially on a date. And she's explaining why they can't be together ever. After they've already said I love you to each other, they hadn't had sex or made love, however you want to phrase it. And they had like hugged each other. It was weird. So I get it. Nicholas Sparks likes the back and forth of romance. I think this is now 2 books in a row where building the romance between the 2 people just seems so rushed. Like in Dreamland, where you were like, okay, these 2 people meet randomly, and now all of a sudden, a week in, they're suddenly in love with each other. But they have very little interaction. Maybe like, he showed her some bees one time. But it was like, it makes you wonder how healthy the idea of some romance novels are when you look at them, right? It's like the things that are sort of being talked about in and around the story, where there's always a sense of like infidelity going on in this book. Once announced that there's the husband in the vegetative state, it just doesn't leave you feeling like a typical romance novel. So then they end up bringing the suspense thriller part back. There's a young girl named Callie who works at a local store. She falls. She gets hurt. She hits her head. She ends up in the hospital. They find out she's lying to everyone this whole time. Her name is not Callie, and she's been stealing Trevor's grandmother's social security number. She worked with his grandfather working the bees for a little while. She's lied about her age. She said she was 19. Everyone knows by looking at her that she's not. So when she's in the hospital, they have to find out more about her, who she is. Trevor ends up going back to Georgia. Natalie ends up going, saying it's police business, even though she's just trying to clearly spend more time around Trevor. This is after she introduces Trevor to Mark, her husband, which didn't really, but she had this weird moment where she was talking to him like a sweet doting wife while introducing another man. It was just weird. The whole thing made you feel weird. So it wasn't like a connection you were rooting for. So for a romance novel, you want to root for that relationship, which I guess you still were in a way, but it made you feel bad about it. And so push came to shove. You guys know I love to use that term. Push came to shove. Callie was a runaway. She was 16 years old. She had ended up she was babysitting her brother, her young brother, and he choked and died under her watch. She stepped outside to take a phone call, came back in, he had choked and died. Her parents blamed her. She overheard heard them say some stuff like, had she only not answered the phone, he'd still be here. She ran away and became this very off-putting person that she called Callie. Her name was Karen Kathleen Johnson. So then there was that. She was dying of anemia, and she needed a marrow transplant. Found out she had 2 twin sisters. One of them was able to do the transplant, and she was reunited with her family. Natalie says to Trevor, we cannot be together. I can't divorce my husband, and his parents aren't going to pull the plug. So this is my life. This is what it is. End of book. Epilogue starts. Callie is getting married to a young man now in her 20s. Trevor comes back. He's finished his residency in Boston. Natalie is at the wedding as well. They reunite. Mark had since passed away. She is no longer a sheriff's deputy, and she owns a flower shop. Mark essentially tells her that he's going to take a job in New Bern, North Carolina, and they embrace and walk back into the wedding together, ending the book. It was lazy. You can't keep using the plot of your other stories. The dialogue in the book was whack, in my opinion. The setup of the romance between Natalie and Trevor was no good. I do appreciate the awareness to PTSD and some of the struggles around that. talked about Trevor's temper, his road rage, some of which I can connect with as someone who has PTSD from my time in the Army. And a lot of those things, okay, fine. I had to push myself to finish this book. I'm glad I got through it. But at the same token, I think it's going to be a while before I pick up another Nicholas Sparks book. I have so many other authors now that I can check out. This one, mixed with The Wish, was just two books that I'm now like, all right, man, I kind of get what's going to happen in each book, and I don't really want to continue down that road for a while. If you come out with something new, maybe I'll check that out. But as far as going back into your old work anymore, I think I'm going to pause on that. Let me know if you guys have read the book, what you think, and I'll see you in the next review.